Welcome again to Great Leaders Serve. I'm your host, Kevin Best, and today we have Tom Hall, retired Air Force colonel, former minister. And Tom, nice to meet you. And tell me a little bit about your current role, what you're doing right now.
Well, I'm trying to figure out retirement now, Kevin. I finished up about 15 years as the senior pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Pittsburgh last summer. And for the last year, we've been working with Johnstahl-wert. My wife and I have been working together with Johnstahl-wert and about a dozen couples in the master executive cohort to try to plan out the next arc of our lives. And it's been a really great experience to have the opportunity to inventory your values and how you can apply those values and your abilities in the last however many productive years you have.
Well, that's pretty cool. So I'm glad you're doing that. Now it's cool. Interesting. It's interesting because, as you said, you're going into retirement. A lot of the interviews we do are people that are owning their own businesses or somehow still working. However,
right.
I think you said you were 30 years when we had our brief conversation before, 30 years in the Air Force. Tell me a little bit about that and this management program that John likes to promote of serving leadership. Obviously, you didn't know about that when you were in the Air Force. But based upon our conversation, what I really wanted to get into was how you were able to use some of the things you've been hearing over the last year and say, wait a second, I've been using this for the last 40 years or so.
Right.
So you can talk a little bit about how you used a serving management program while you were in this huge bureaucracy of the Air Force.
I always thought of myself as a leader. I was like the student council president in high school. I went to the Air Force Academy. So I had really always prepared for leadership roles. I found that when I went into ministry after my career in the Air Force, it was a lot different than I imagined. I had taught in my last assignment in the Air Force, I had taught leadership and ethics at a school called the Air War College. I think most people are more familiar with the Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, but all of the services have their own senior service schools where they try to prepare senior officers for executive level leadership. And I found that so many people work on the technical aspects of their organizations. They work on the accounting or the technology or the strategy and the vision, but helping themselves, intentionally working to become a better leader is something that people are very suspicious of. It's not something that comes naturally to a lot of people. And so in teaching leadership and ethics to senior officers, a lot of the time we had to convince people that this was in their best interest, to think systematically about how you prepare to lead at different levels. And for example, we taught a lot of international officers, and in some other cultures, the idea is that when you get to a certain position, you're entitled. Now you get to cash in. You get yours. You put in your dues as a younger person. So the idea that you become a servant leader is even more of a servant leader when you get into senior leadership roles. It was not easy for a lot of people.
So how do you help people overcome that? If it's something that they've been raised always to get individual accomplishments or to continually rise up in the ranks, how do you get them to start to think about beyond themselves, that greater purpose, and not just the mission, but what is the purpose? As a senior leader, what is your purpose?
Well, that is a great question. That is a great question. We went through this time in the government. I think it was started back in the 80s and then into the 90s this era of total quality management. And people, whether they wanted to or not, looked at statistics to drive their business decisions. And that left a lot of things wanting. It really left out the idea of human interaction and human motivation. And so we got into what I would think was like a golden era of leadership development, where there were the bookstore's shelves were filled with books on leadership, not just on the technical aspects of management, but on leadership. And as people were exposed to this, if they had an open mind, then they could see that these different ideas of leadership, transformational leadership and situational leadership, and especially servant leadership, that for some people that opened their eyes. On the other hand, it was really important for the senior leader in an organization to take an interest in whatever leadership program was being offered. So if the senior leader sent his folks off to a week-long course or to read certain books or to go through a certain curriculum, and then when he got back, if he wasn't supported, if that leader wasn't supported by the big boss, then it was all a waste of time. So I don't know. I don't really know. If you're the one who's in charge and you think you're already God's gift to leadership, I don't know how you overcome that.
Yeah. So at some point, though, you then retired and you decided to get into the ministry. Tell me a little bit about that path, and then let's talk about the leadership that you had to realize when you got moved over to there. So first, talk about how'd you take that path?
Well, my wife kept us in church through the years I was in the Air Force. We would move every couple of years, and I would always say we would usually go to church, but I would always say I was too busy to get involved. And when I went at my last assignment to teach at the Air War College, where I had been a student, I knew I was running out of excuses that I was too busy to get involved in the church. And one thing led to another. It's a long story, but I ended up using the GI Bill to go to Pittsburgh Seminary after retirement. And then I was called to be the senior pastor of First Presbyterian Church in downtown Pittsburgh. So I was really thrown into a leadership role that was nothing like I had ever experienced before. Now, I thought I was really arrogant. Maybe that's not the right word. Maybe I was fooling myself. But I thought that, I'd been a commander 3 times. I'd chaired a 15-nation committee at NATO headquarters in Brussels, Belgium. I thought, well, surely I can lead a church. Surely I can lead a session. And that was my big mistake. When you're in the Air Force, you all wear the same uniform. Or even when you're in an international military setting, everybody wears a uniform. And everybody knows what a mission is and the value of having a clear mission statement. But in a church, in a volunteer organization, the idea of mission can almost be offensive to a lot of people. And I would say there was one aspect between the military and leading in church that was very similar. And that is, why do we need this leadership stuff? Don't we just do what we do? So I went in with a big misconception. And then the next problem I had was getting caught up in the personal aspects of it. When you try to lead change in any organizations, people are going to react very, sometimes negatively. They're losing something in sometimes.
I think it's most of the time, yeah.
Yeah, and I had taught leading change, but I found out getting caught up in the personal aspects, and I was taking attacks personally, and you simply can't do that. I will say.
Well, let me follow up on that. Let me follow up on that in a second. So when you're thinking about this, you're in this leadership role. You've been asked to take over this, and people are coming back at you and saying, hey, that's not the way this has been done, and you don't know what you're talking about, and possibly some other nice things that they said to you behind your back. And those nice things were couched. So when you're thinking about that and you're thinking about the leadership style of servant leadership, and you're saying things are I'm trying to work towards mission. And in my head, mission also relates to greater purpose. This is way beyond me. All right.
Right.
So when you were hearing this kind of negative feedback, did you believe that you were not really going towards mission, greater purpose? Or was it that you felt that the people who were part of that church didn't understand their mission or didn't understand their purpose as it relates to whatever they're doing in their lives, and that's how they couldn't understand the difference between what you were trying to do?
Well, going in a church, going through a strategic planning process, the language of business, the language of strategic planning is going to offend people, again, just by having an idea of articulating your values, articulating a mission. We just do church. So that was a challenge. I would also say that I was intimidated by this particular church. First of all, I'd never thought about being minister for 30 years in the Air Force. It was only until the last few years. And secondly, to the extent that I did think about it, I would be in a suburban church with a nice big parking lot where everybody, all the kids went to the same high school, and it was easy to get together for potlucks. Well, downtown Pittsburgh is it's the center of a great city. And so that particular challenge, the technical aspects of leading in that particular church, I wasn't used to. And I'd come right out of seminary when the previous senior pastors had been some of the most famous pastors in the country. So I was just self-conscious all the time the first few years. And I will say that over time, what I think won people over was that I did practice servant leadership. I just kind of did it naturally. I remember one time early on, we were getting a delivery of food from the food bank that we distributed. Now, the delivery truck was out back, and so I just went down and started unloading, got in with the other folks, unloading the pallets of groceries. And the people were amazed. They said, we've seen a senior pastor do this before. Or we went to, our church has a wonderful camp, and they told me I was the first pastor ever to do the zip line. So I think the things that I just did naturally, the servant leader kinds of things that I did naturally were very key, that people could tell that, well, you actually walk the talk. You're not asking us to do anything that you're not willing to do yourself.
Yeah, as you mentioned, actions speak louder than words oftentimes. So let me move you into another area. My understanding of a senior person at a church would be they also have control of the financial purse strings there. Was that correct in your case? You had some aspect of control over that?
Not exactly. In the Presbyterian tradition, we understand that no roles are more important than others. But of course, somebody is at the top of the organization, and the senior pastor is usually that. And you're right in saying that wow, money is really a touchy issue in any organization, and it's especially touchy in the church. But I was fortunate to have a wonderful group of trustees who really focused on the financial competency. We were constantly being audited. And so that was one thing I didn't have to worry about. Now, how we spend the money, that was a different issue, because some people want to spend it on serving the needy downtown. Some want to send the money overseas to support missionary overseas. And then a lot of people say, look at this big old building. It has a lot of needs. And so that was the thing that I had to help negotiate. But we had, and this is again where servant leadership is so important, because people had to, I thought it was important that people saw me giving to the church. And I talked about the importance of giving a lot. And people saw me serving at the meals for the homeless, at the days when we pass out groceries. So I made sure that I was visible in those areas.
I think one of the interesting things that I think about, Tom, is that when you talk about the church was working on three different aspects, as you talked about financially. Hey, how are we going to make sure that the church, the building, the maintenance, that the grounds are doing what they're supposed to be, that they're in as best shape as they possibly can? How do we help our current customers, if you think about it, the people around the area that need our help specifically, and how do we help get the new customers? You probably weren't getting new customers for the church in Pittsburgh, but you were getting new customers for the Presbyterian Church worldwide by doing that outreach across the oceans. So most businesses have to run through those issues themselves, right? So when you think about how you use that servant leadership towards those three areas that you really had to, it's hard to prioritize one over the other. Everyone has a major priority to it. How do you utilize and use your recent skills that you learned with John as well? But think back in time. How did you use that leadership that you had there to be able to allow people to embrace the idea that all three things have to be utilized? It's fair, not equal in a lot of cases. So you had to make some difficult decisions.
Right.
So the serving part is, yes, I'm willing to get my hands dirty and do this and be with you and hang around with you. But the leadership part is also, hey, somebody has to make a decision. So how did you use that leadership and the skill in negotiations, as you talked about, the servant leadership that you talked about? How did you utilize that? Can you give me any examples of how that worked for you with those three pillars of priority that the church had?
One thing I love to cast visions. That's kind of, I don't know, when you do those strength finder kind of instruments, I'm the visionary guy. And I thought that if I just cast this vision, if my PowerPoint is good enough, then people are going to get on board. And a few do, but others want to be loved first. I think everybody needs to be loved, but others want to, what's the phrase? They don't care what you know until they know that you care.
Right.
And it took me a while. Again, I've been teaching senior leaders in the Air Force who loved PowerPoint, who kind of lived by charts and graphs. And I did not spend enough time at first in just having coffee with people and going to their workplace, having lunch with them, or just getting to know them, or calling them before a meeting, so that when you go to a meeting to make a decision, especially the financial ones that might be tricky, I did not spend enough time at first hanging around with people and building trust. So I guess that's the answer.
Okay.
You can't build I don't think it's possible to build too much trust.
Excellent. So I assume now that as you're thinking about this with your own personal family, you look back at your life now and you're like, yeah, I was using servant leadership with my family as well. Tell me a little bit about that. How do you promote servant leadership within your own family, making sure that everybody understands that thought process?
You know, it's really interesting. I've got two sons that are in ministry, and every now and then they're 42 and 40. They're 42 and 40. And every now and then they will say something. They will remind me of something they remembered when they were kids. And my older son was reminding me when we lived in Washington, D.C., and I was a group commander, that there was a big traffic jam, and I was out in the staff car. And I didn't use the staff car. I was tempted to use the military vehicle for personal use, but I was just adamant that I wasn't gonna do it. And he was upset by that at the time. But then he realized that over time that was actually an example of integrity. I think they saw me serving. It's just setting the example, I guess. That's the simplest way of saying it.
Yeah.
It's just not ordering your kids around. But, you know, I'm cutting the grass. You know, you can cut the grass too. If I can cut the grass, you know, you're 14 now. You can cut the grass.
Right.
Of course, we spent lots of times together. We always family vacations. So I had lots of times to screw up as a parent, and lots of times.
That's cool. So when you think about you had to bring in other people at different times that weren't either part of the church or part of the military or part of your family, other professionals, other advisors that you had to bring in for whatever purpose. It could be an accountant, an attorney, a financial person, an insurance person, bank, whatever. Both in the business and personally, do you feel that you utilized that servant leadership mindset to try and get a person who similarly has the passion about servant leadership, or did you go for a skill set first?
I think you hire the person with the right attitude and the right aptitude first. And the passion, I think it was the book by Kevin Ford, who was our church consultant. And in the book says, Kevin Ford says that 90 or 95% of what you do, anybody can do. But you need to hire the person that cannot help to do, that can't stop themselves from doing what you need done. And oh my gosh, that is so true. I mean, how many of us actually in our work do what we have a degree for? And of course, leaders have to know a little bit about everything, or at least know who to call, or be willing. And I think that this may have been a strength of mine that it was I was willing to ask the question if I didn't know the answer. I never tried to bluff my way through. So yeah, hiring somebody that's passionate about what they do, and then being willing to actually rely on them when they give you the advice, even if maybe it isn't the advice you're
right. Exactly. So last question I got for you is others that want to, they watch this podcast and they say, oh, you know what, I want to be more of a serving leader. I want to be more of a servant leader. How do you help them out? What would you say? What would be your best advice for helping them out?
Well, let me say this first, that I've been around johnstahl-wert and the Center for Serving Leaders for a long time now. John has led a Bible study in our church. And so over the years, I've gotten to be with many of the clients of CSL, and they are just passionate about what they've learned through. I know this will sound like a commercial that you put me up to this, but I've been around many of these senior business leaders, and in this cohort that I was in with a dozen other couples for this last year, these were people who have very significant international companies. And the servant leader model just resonated with them. So, if I don't know the exact answer to your question, it's like asking, if you're an arrogant jerk, if I'm an arrogant jerk, how do I not become an arrogant jerk? How do I become more of a servant leader? Well, if you don't know you're an arrogant jerk,
right,
there's no fix that. Yeah. I would say as a minister, as a Presbyterian pastor, it's the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's allowing yourself to be humbled by the God who created everything, who became a servant himself. It's certainly in every one of my sermons, that piece, the gospel piece, with Jesus always showed up.
Yeah, I think it's the allow yourself to be humbled. So if you're an arrogant jerk, why are you going to allow yourself? But I think a lot of people get to a point where they actually do, regardless of the leadership style that they have, and then they go out to search it. And I just don't think it's available to them as easy. So this is one of the reasons that we're doing these podcasts. So I want to thank you, Tom, for being part of the podcast today. I want to remind everybody out there that Great Leaders Serve is a valuable message we're trying to get out to everybody. So please, watch the videos, share the videos with your friends, send it out to others that you think could benefit from this. It's going to be on all of your favorite podcast apps, from YouTube to Spotify to Apple to all Amazon, I don't know, all these other ones, Audible, all these other ones. Most importantly, please share this out. Thank you, Tom, for being a wonderful conversation today. I really appreciate it. And for everybody else, thank you.
For more information about the Center for Serving Leadership, visit our website at centerforservingleadership.com.